Test, 1, 2, 3. Hello, peoples. How are we? The few, the proud, the dedicated.
Ventured into the front row tonight.
We're being brave.
Right.
Yeah.
Step at a time.
Stepping outside of comfort zone here.
All right. So,
This is the path. That's funny.
that's right. So tonight is a double header, right? We're supposed to talk about the third and fourth noble truths. But we'll probably mostly talk about the third noble truth, nirvana, since the fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path, right? We're doing that already, but we'll have a little overview, I suppose. Future excitement. So, nirvana, an interesting topic, a silly topic to have a talk on, really, because, the most direct teaching of nirvana is from the Zen tradition, right? So the Buddha holds up a flower, and there's the monk sitting in the back row back there, and suddenly he gets it. And the Buddha sees, yes, he smiles, you got it. So, thanks for coming.
See, this is when you should have sat on the back row.
Right, you're totally in the wrong position. It's never going to work.
This is our path.
Right. But yeah, unfortunately, I'm unable to transmit the meaning of nirvana directly to you. A special transmission outside the scriptures. This is what that's called. So that's what Zen's all about. So we have to wait for the Zen guy to get your special transmission outside the scriptures.
Which, by the way, Zen guy coming January 9th.
It's in January. Oh.
It's in January.
Oh, Zen. Yes, that Stuart Smalley. That Zen guy.
Oh.
Not our class. Not Stuart Smalley.
I just wanted
What's his
to
name?
not forget, it's Nathan Smalley.
Nathan Smalley. I've been calling him Stuart Smalley for like the last year.
Well,
So
he doesn't
Nathan
know that.
Smalley. Well, it's on camera now. So Nathan Smalley will be here.
Doggone it, people like me.
Exactly. That's where Stuart Smalley comes from. So you hear this, Mr. Smalley, I apologize.
So I just wanted to say, because we're
Yes.
registering people
Right.
right now, it's on our website, on the events page, and you can register. And I want to suggest that you come to the Friday night talk, because we don't often have teachers, real teachers here. I mean, we have us, but
It's okay, I'll take it.
we don't have people that are sort of professional Buddhist teachers.
It's their job.
And he is a good one, and Zen is good. And so there's a little tiny Zen group here. You might want to think about joining them, but you can always come to the Friday night talk and just suss the guy out and see what you think.
Cool.
You saw him
Absolutely.
last time, right?
Yeah, I would recommend it. I think most of us that were there.
Most of us would.
So yes, Nathan Smalley.
Nathan Smalley. January.
All right. My peculiar form of dyslexia strikes again. So, yeah, how does one talk about nirvana? So we're talking about the third noble truth, the truth of the cessation of suffering. So this state of permanently not suffering anymore, that's called nirvana. Or, right, the Theravadas, it's nibbana, right? Think of the cotton stuffed in the cheeks. Nibbana, so nirvana. And in the West, of course, we often call it enlightenment, right? That's kind of a word that stuck to it. I mean, it's a little confusing. We already had the age of enlightenment, right? We had the scientific revolution, and then the age of enlightenment, and then the existentialists showed up, and everything was bad again. I don't know what happened with that, but nirvana, is a little different from that. But even so, I think there's a good reason that the word enlightenment gets used for both. The Enlightenment thinkers did see themselves as coming out of an age of darkness and ignorance into the light of reason, right? That's what the Enlightenment was about. The Enlightenment prized thinking for yourself and understanding things for yourself and not taking the easy way out of just believing what you're told. And I think that kind of thinking has a definite Buddhist flavor and went in a different direction here in the West. But, the Buddha often used phrases that were basically, come and see for yourself. It's a very famous phrase, come and see. And so the truth is something that wise people know for themselves. They're not just repeating what they've been told. So we have the same kind of idea. Everything else about it is different. So nirvana, or enlightenment, is knowing and experiencing the truth for yourself and being free from the things that were trapping you in ignorance. Right? And before we go any further and say more words about nirvana, I want to give you Ajahn Sujato, another one of those Theravadan teachers, Sujato. I haven't really listened to a lot of his stuff, but he said this: nirvana is an enigma, elusive, threatening, uncompromising. It will never be tamed, no matter how hard we try to pretend that it's something like something. It's not. It's nothing like anything. Nirvana is nothing like anything. So, now that we've been warned, let's try to tame nirvana anyway, right? Just pin it down on our little board of insects that we're collecting. I think it's important to understand that this goal of Buddhism, enlightenment or nirvana, it's not an all or nothing kind of thing. There are stages in the path. You can be a little enlightened or more enlightened, or a lot completely enlightened. And so as you develop your practice and you learn to see the world like a Buddhist, you start to see things differently. You can get glimpses or tastes of nirvana.
Don't mind me, I'm just fixing the video.
Oh, okay.
Don't mind me, I'm sorry.
Speaking of pinning, are you going to pin me
I'm gonna pin you.
to the pegboard?
I'm gonna pin you.
Very good.
Speaker.
Blah, blah, blah.
Speaker, sorry.
So, you can start to develop an intuition about nirvana well before you experience it directly. And it's kind of that smell thing again, right? This is unfortunately seems to be a common metaphor for this class for me. You start to recognize what freedom from grasping smells like. You start to recognize what it feels like. You start to recognize what's truly helpful to your practice and what's harmful. This intuition comes to you along the way, and it just gets stronger and stronger. It's most people's experience anyway. And you can have revelations along the way. I mean, a Zen person might call that satori, right? It can be, a little satori or a big satori. You don't necessarily just have one satori. But you can make sudden leaps in your understanding. But you also spend a lot of time just putting one foot in front of the other, right? And you're not sure if you're making progress or not. If you feel that way, know that this is a typical Buddhist experience. A lot of times we're just hacking through the wilderness still. It's like, I'm sure I'm going to get a vision one of these days. It's out there somewhere for me. So, what does the word nirvana even mean? It relates to the idea of extinguishing a flame, specifically to blow out a flame. And the Buddha often tied the word nirvana to the idea of cooling something off that had been on fire. I don't know how hot it is in northern India, but I always think maybe because if it's kind of a hot country, this is a good metaphor. If you were in the Arctic Circle, maybe it'd be different. But yeah, so nirvana is always associated with this idea of cooling off. Of course, for us, the word extinguishing tends to make us think of ourselves getting extinguished, right? And that's disconcerting. But one thing to know, and you may know this already, but I always think it's interesting, that's not how people thought about fire at the time. So the idea is that when a fire was burning in, 500 BC India, is there another name for BC like there is for AD? You got Common Era, and then you got
It's the BCE.
BCE, before the Common Era, yes, there we go. So 500 BCE. When a log was burning, it's like the fire was trapped by the wood. It was stuck to the wood. And so if you put the fire out, then the fire is released from the wood, and it can go back to wherever fire lives, in its natural condition somewhere. And so that's the idea, is that nirvana is release. Nirvana is to be unbound, to be free. That's the idea that the Buddha was often trying to convey with these kind of metaphors. And we have the same kind of ideas in the West, right? Have you heard of the phlogiston theory, like that heat is this substance, and when you rub something, you're drawing the phlogiston out of it. So pre-scientifically, people often thought of these things as substances, and so fire was this substance that needed to be freed. That's where that was going. I'm always curious if you had a comment. So, what actually happens when craving stops? As we've already said in this class, it sort of sounds like Buddhism is trying to make you stop existing. It's that via negativa, this Christian idea. I borrow a lot of Christian concepts. You'll have to excuse me for that. But it's this idea that you explain things by the negative. It's not this and it's not that, because that's the only way you can talk about some things, because they can't really be put into words. But yeah, Buddhism isn't about getting annihilated. It's not about nihilism, that idea that nothing matters. And it's not about living forever in some kind of static heavenly state. Buddhists are not the frozen chosen. There's another Christian kind of joke thing, theology. And the Buddha himself said he doesn't teach annihilationism. He doesn't teach eternalism. The goal of Buddhism isn't either of those things, no matter how it may sound. So what is it? You think logically, there's only so many choices. What are we doing here? But nirvana doesn't fit into our usual ways of thinking. Ajahn Chah would ask his students, if you can't go forward, and you can't go back, and you can't stand still, what do? And so, Theravada has its own little koans too, a little bit. And you can be the wise guy who says, well, I just go sideways, and that's when the Zen master takes off his shoe, right? Go back, try again. So yeah, is nirvana the goal of Buddhism? In a sense, it is the third noble truth, right? But it's the Zen people would say that's not the right way to think about it, right? Nirvana is not a goal in the usual sense. If you think you're going to achieve nirvana or get nirvana the way you get 100% on a test, right, you probably aren't going to get there. Nirvana isn't something you get. It's not something you can grasp, because nirvana is non-grasping, right? It's what you discover when your mind is pure, you manage to stop grasping, you stop clinging to things. Nirvana is then going to mysteriously and sometimes surprisingly show up when you are ready for it. It's sort of like you're inviting nirvana. That's as good as you can do. And the other thing is, any descriptions of enlightenment that you hear, such as everything I'm saying, it's really more for reinforcing your practice than really trying to describe the destination. Because, like I said, enlightenment can't be described. Nirvana is beyond words. It's not a conceptual thing. It doesn't have parts. It doesn't have a beginning or a middle or an end. It can't be analyzed. It's not like anything else humans experience, like the guy said. Nirvana is like nothing that we know of. But it's still good to have some idea of what we're doing, right? So we'll talk a little bit about a few other items. But first, are there any questions now that I've ran in here at 5:31? I'm so sorry. I will leave the house earlier from now on. Any thoughts so far before I ramble on some more about it?
Well, I hear you just keep hacking away.
Yeah, well, who was it who said persistence is the only thing that really works in this world, right? The world is full of geniuses who were never recognized and all that kind of stuff. Persistence is the key. Because, Buddhism is all about intent, and people have a lot of meditation sessions that feel like this. It's like you're sitting on the cushion, it's like, oh, meditation's finally over. That was terrible, my brain was just totally off the track. But that's okay, because you held the intention, and that is training your mind as much as or more than anything you might experience, you are learning to hold an intention. And so much of progress in Buddhism is about that intention. You carry that intention all day, every day, things will happen. So the way nirvana is talked about, at least in the Theravada world, is that there's sort of two flavors. One is, you're a human being and you're studying the teachings and you reach enlightenment, but you're still a person on the earth, right? You're just an enlightened person, right? And so, and that's called technically in Theravada Buddhism, nirvana with remainder. It's like math or something, right? Nirvana with remainder, because you still have this body that's made of the five aggregates, which we will talk about, another good list. And so, you still have this little sliver of karma that's what's going to be the rest of your life. You're going to finish living out your life, and that's the last life you're going to live. But it doesn't mean that nothing bad can happen to you or anything like that. You don't get any plot armor just because you're enlightened necessarily. I'll have to excuse that term. It's such a good term, though. The really interesting thing, or more interesting from a philosophical point of view, is what happens when an enlightened person dies. This person who's reached nirvana while they were alive, and they pass away, now what? And in Theravada, that tends to get called peri-nirvana. You're an enlightened being has passed away, and that is nirvana without remainder, as you might have guessed. So now you're fully there. There's nothing left holding you, to the world system. You have no karma at all. You are free from future rebirths. And in this state, Theravada Buddhism says it is not possible to say what has happened to you. Do you exist? Do you not exist? Do you both exist and not exist? Do you neither exist nor not exist? That's called the quadrilemma. And all of those questions are wrong. None of those questions can be answered. And so another Ajahn Amara, I think, just says, you are beyond the realm of knowledge of gods and men. You can't say what has happened to you. But anyway, so I wonder why people don't talk about nirvana, And you might have noticed a lot of times, and this is sometimes true, that people get interested in Buddhism and they go take classes and all of this, but nobody ever talks about nirvana. But maybe your experience is different. Maybe you got somebody who just won't shut up about nirvana, like me this evening. Sometimes it doesn't get talked about much. And there's also this idea, it's kind of an old idea, you may not have run across this, but eventually you will, the idea that nobody can actually reach nirvana anymore, right? That this is an old Theravada idea for sure. I think Mahayana might think about things differently. They have sort of a different thing going on altogether, maybe in some ways. And of course, Vajrayana, that's like, we want you enlightened in this life. Do it, Of course you can get enlightened. But there was this idea throughout much of Buddha's history that after the Buddha and all his arahants passed away, the world degenerated and people degenerated, and then hardly anyone had the spiritual capacity to reach enlightenment, to know nirvana for themselves. In fact, Japanese Buddhism has a name for that. They call the time after about 1000 CE the Mappo age. This is the degenerate age, M-A-P-P-O, the Mappo age. And so nobody can really practice Buddhism the way the Buddha and those people did. And really that's part of what led to this, either the rise or the popularity of Pure Land Buddhism. Because see, in Pure Land Buddhism, instead of having to become a great meditator and understand some profound truth, you can ask a bodhisattva for help to be reborn in the Pure Land, where it's actually possible to practice. So,
where did Pure Land take root? Where was that a location, or is that just a philosophical thought?
It's been all over. I mean, Pure Land, really, Theravada ideas and Mahayana ideas and Pure Land ideas really were around from the beginning. That they've always been part of this mix of the Buddhist philosophy and understanding. I mean, Pure Land was very big for many centuries in China. The interesting thing is that the Chan school of Buddhism, which was very focused on meditation, and the Pure Land school, which kind of had this call upon the Bodhisattva idea, they actually shared monasteries. It was like a formal thing. You go to a Chan monastery and there were going to be some Pure Land people there, and that sort of thing happened all the time.
It's also really common still, like if you were to go to there's a Vietnamese Buddhist center in
Bauxite, right.
They're Pure Land Buddhists. A lot of times the ethnic centers are Pure Land Buddhists, and Anam Thupten is one of the teachers that comes here. He said his parents, who are Tibetan, are indistinguishable from Southern Baptists because they're hoping to die and go to heaven, go
To the Pure Land, right.
when they go.
Oh, that's where
Right.
the Pure Land. Okay,
Yes, the
I
Pure Land
understand
is
what that
where
means.
you go.
You know the Pure
Okay.
Land because you've
Right.
grown up with it. It's heaven,
Right.
basically.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't, anyway, so it's quite common in the world right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Pure Land Buddhism has really been the most popular form of Buddhism.
Very big.
Because it was for the common people. It's like you don't have to become a monk and you don't have to learn all this stuff. Just call upon Amitabha Buddha, recite the phrase, which I can never quite remember, and you will be reborn in the Pure Land. So there you go.
I am familiar with that.
So you
This
can,
is magical.
We know it really well in our culture, but I think that, and so
Embrace
in
through
fact, we
faith,
have to,
right.
we have to kind of challenge it, in ourselves when it comes up. When we start thinking, if I do this really well, I'll get rewarded, and stuff like that. But it's, we are following a separate track here with what was taught and studied in monasteries this is the weird thing about Western Buddhism, is that in their countries of origin, what we do was only done in the confines of a monastic
Right.
situation where people were fully educated. This was seeped into them after they were like 9 years old or something. They would grow up with this and be professional Buddhists, right? And here we are, I'm sorry, I'm ranting a little, but
no,
When you say we.
Sure, class two.
What do you mean? Okay.
Anam Thupten looks at us, me, and he says,
A householder.
we don't know what to do with you. You
right.
don't fit, you don't we're not monks, but we're trying to learn what the monks learn, we're trying to practice what the monks practice. And so,
But doesn't that make us yogis, though?
yeah, we're yogis, we're householder yogis, that's what Yoga called us, householder yogis.
Right. Not in a monastery.
But it's a brand
No
new
vows.
category, and you won't find people like us even in Japan, really. They're either, I don't know about that. I shouldn't
Well,
say
it's
that,
changing.
but
The rest of the world is becoming, other Buddhists in other countries are becoming the same thing as we, because there was this huge revival of Buddhism in Southeast Asia, and what's funny is it was in response to the Christian missionaries coming in, and all of the old, Buddhist teachers are like, oh dear, we need to respond, right? And we are going to start teaching the common people, the villagers out in the countryside, we are going to start teaching them real Buddhism. And that is what happened.
Rather than keeping it.
Yeah, rather than they just support the monks and the monks do the real Buddhism, everybody's going to learn about the sutras, everybody's going to start meditating.
Oh.
This is serious, and in the last couple hundred years, that's what's happened. And so now they are also, the same place we are, the people in Asia who are on this kind of new path.
Yeah, so there's people like us in Asia.
Right.
I don't know them, but I'm just saying I know in America what we're doing here at EBS is a new version, basically,
Right.
of Buddhism.
In the last century or two, this is a new thing. It's like the woman.
That's encouraging.
It is.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, and it's also, an experiment.
Right.
Let's see how it
We'll
works,
see how it works.
It makes me feel better that I'm not behind.
No,
You're on the cutting
where I need to
edge.
be. Yeah, oh, that's helpful, thank you. I keep thinking I need to pedal faster because I'm so far behind, but.
Is Pure Land really conceived like heaven as opposed to a place where most people are well trained, and so you're around a community constantly that helps guide you toward nirvana rather
I mean,
than.
maybe. It's an after-death experience, so that's
Well,
what
yeah,
makes it.
of course.
But I don't know the details about Pure Land, except
Yeah.
that you don't aspire to become a Buddha, you aspire to be born maybe in the company of Buddhas, is what you're saying.
Yeah, that's
Right.
Yeah.
But it,
Sitting on the right hand of Jesus.
but you know,
it's not like
I mean,
meet your relatives there.
but we can
I
say
know
some, we can say some general things about it because it is a deva realm, and a deva realm is you know, that is a thing in Buddhism. There's very clear as to there's different deva realms with different levels of purity. Pure Land is pretty far up there. There are some deva realms that aren't, they're like Earth, but just better, you know. But it's still a sort of a sensual world, and a lot of the same things go on. But you have to be more moral to be reborn in a deva realm that's above Earth. You know, you have to have some good karma. You have to have done some good deeds, and so things generally. The idea is they work better in a deva. The deva realm is a nicer place, you know, and the Pure Land is very pure, you know, and so you know, if you are, you call upon the Amitabha Buddha, you know, and it's sort of that's a very convenient thing, you know, but, you know, I'm speaking from Theravada point of view, I'll stop. But, you know, the idea is that, yes, it is a place that it's ordered and structured and good, and you can practice there in a way that you can't practice in the earthly world, you know. And you know, and you are expected to be a moral person. You know, Pure Land Buddhists don't get to slack and commit crimes or whatever. You need to be a good moral person. You know, it's the expectation, even in Pure Land Buddhism. You know that you need to work a little bit on refining yourself. You know, but anyway, so yes, it's a good place to practice. You know, there's teachers and all that sort of thing, and Buddhism is accepted as the way things are, right, in the Pure Land. So you will practice there. Yeah.
We'll talk about deities when we get to Vajrayana.
Right.
That's a long way down the road.
Right. So, what's going on? I sent a message. I sent a message to you, and you weren't here, or you were.
Oh.
But I should have sent it to you.
No, he was, everybody got here late because of the weather and the traffic.
Yeah, and I got here a little bit late.
We're all here now.
What I missed.
So, right.
Just in the
Oh, well, I transmitted, I did the transmission outside the scriptures already, and so everybody else.
We are done with suffering, that's good.
Yeah,
We all shuddered for
thank
seconds.
goodness, thank goodness. So, nirvana. So, the simplest definition I've ever heard for nirvana is the one that Ajahn Chah gives, and he just calls it the reality of non-grasping. That is his definition. Being the practical fellow that he is, that is his definition. That when you learn to not grasp, you will experience the reality of not grasping. And you know, that is pretty much it. I mean, you know, nirvana comes after you're able to get past the second noble truth of craving. You know, as you manage that and your craving ceases, nirvana is what you will experience naturally. You know, it's just the absence of craving. That is correct, you know. But there's a lot of other things that get said about it too. And also notice that all of these ways of talking about nirvana are in the negative, right? Because you know, we can't really say, well, nirvana is like this, and it's like that, and it's blue, and it's about this size, and you know, we can't assign characteristics to nirvana because it's not conceptual. So all we can tell you what it's not. And it's like a thing of a pinball, you know. It's like, well, bounce off everything that's not, and you'll end up going in the right direction, you know. That's as good as it gets. That's why the teachings are sort of elliptical. It's because you learn to peel yourself off of this world and turn away from everything you know. And that's when nirvana will appear before you, I suppose, to put it in a strange way. So people talk about nirvana, they say it's stopping the war. This is one of my favorite expressions for nirvana, stopping the war. We have this internal war, right, between all the different conflicting parts of our minds and us with the world, and nirvana resolves all of that. the war stops. And of course, putting down your burden, even Jesus talked about putting down your burden. This is a common spiritual metaphor, but it also gets used. The thing about it is we're so used to fighting that war, and we're so used to carrying that burden that we don't even notice it anymore. This is the pernicious thing. We don't realize how much we cling, how much strife is going on inside us, because to us, that's just normal state, right? When a kid grows up in a bad household, they don't know it's bad, not for a while. They eventually figure it out. Kind of like if you're in a place and you just can't seem to think straight and you're having trouble focusing and you're just getting a headache and all of that, and then suddenly the big air conditioner that was making this tremendous noise cuts off. And suddenly it's deathly quiet. And your whole body and your mind just relax, right? And you realize I was completely tense because this background noise that had been going on all day, I just quit even noticing it. I wasn't even paying attention to it anymore. When it stops, suddenly I can take a breath. It's like I'm free. I can think again. And this is very much the idea, is you don't know how much you are being held down.
HVAC system. Okay.
Exactly, yeah. So I'm going to introduce some new metaphors into the canon. But to me, that, I think that's very evocative.
I can grab on.
The samsara is the HVAC system. We're waiting for it to finally turn on. The noisy HVAC system. We don't know anything about that here at EBS. Anyway, so some other words in the Pali Canon. The unconditioned is another name for nirvana. And so there's a verse that talks about the unconditioned is the ending of greed, hate, and delusion. Probably could have guessed that one, The ending of greed, hate, and delusion. It is the unformed, the unconditioned, the end, the truth, the other shore, the subtle, the everlasting, the invisible, the undiversified, peace, the deathless, the blessed, safety, the wonderful, the marvelous, nibbana or nirvana, purity, freedom, the island, it's another big metaphor in Theravada, the refuge, and the beyond.
Are these all terms?
These are all terms that have been used to describe nirvana or give you an idea of what we're talking about. Metaphors, exactly. These are just metaphors. And so what are we talking about? What does it mean to be unformed, unborn, unmade, unconditioned? All of these negative terms. Well, nirvana doesn't arise from anything else. It's the only thing in the Buddhist scheme that's like that. Nothing made nirvana. It didn't show up one day. It was never made. It will never cease. It's timeless. In Western philosophical terms, you might think of something like the unmoved mover, right? Except nirvana isn't trying to move anything, but it is that sort of, if you want to think about it philosophically, that's kind of the zone I think you want to be in. Now, nirvana is like that silent, still point. All the clanging of the world revolves around, right? Where you stand on the merry-go-round, you'll never get thrown off, right? You stand right in the middle. That it's not moving. Well, you are spinning around in a circle getting dizzy, I suppose. And that may relate to enlightenment too in some ways. So Buddhism doesn't want to limit your thinking by trying to tell you what nirvana is, because if you have some wrong idea about nirvana, it gets in the way of your progress. Because you'll set your sights too low if you have some conceptual notion, this is nirvana, this is what I'm shooting for, you'll make a mistake and think that you got there. You'll stop too soon, right? But if your inner vision is clear, like we say, you let go of your worldly concerns, you turn away from all that is, what's left for you to see is nirvana. So in the Theravada tradition anyway, nirvana is also described as being happy and blissful. That's not true, that's not the way all traditions talk about it. But one of my favorite Dhammapada verses, health is the most precious gift, contentment is the greatest wealth, trust is the best kinship, nirvana is the highest bliss. Makes for a good refrigerator, right? So yeah, nirvana gets called blissful. I mean, in some traditions, don't talk about it that way. And for one thing, that can be misinterpreted because nirvana, the happiness of nirvana isn't the happiness of the ego, where you're happy because you have something, right? Bliss is just your natural state of mind. You know, it's just where you live. There's nothing you do to get it in this scheme of nirvana. So how much else do I want to say? For something you can't talk about, I managed to collect a ridiculous number of things to say. So is nirvana some super incredible mystical experience, which is how a lot of schools of Buddhism would put it? Or is it completely ordinary and practical and mundane, which is kind of how the Zen schools like to talk about it? But I think, unfortunately, the answer is yes. Because enlightenment tends to completely rearrange your thinking, right? You experience the world in a new way, in a way you didn't expect, but it's also a way that's utterly simple. It's just the way things are when you don't have a bunch of mental nonsense fogging everything up, right? You just see clearly, and in that sense, it's perfectly ordinary. So you can take this both ways. You can shout it to the heavens, the highest bliss, blah, blah, blah. But, Zen is good for this. They had that saying, before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. Right? After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So it's not like you're on some ethereal plane. Life goes on in the same way it did before. Another one that's also good. Before one studies Zen, mountains are mountains and waters are waters. After a first glimpse into the truth of Zen, mountains are no longer mountains and waters are no longer waters. After enlightenment, mountains are once again mountains and waters are once again waters, right? So there is this idea that the process of this Buddhist journey can be quite disorienting. You are letting go of all sorts of things that you thought you needed to hold on to. And you are acquiring, some new ways of understanding things. But ultimately, everything comes back around. You're just still that regular Joe that sort of, whatever, one floor up or whatever, but in the same place that you were. So yeah, I guess I would say, just in my own words, nirvana is something that will give you a vision and a type of freedom that you didn't have before. And they come from a place that you didn't even know existed, right? Like we have 3 dimensions, it's like nirvana comes in from a fourth or something, It's not related to your usual ways of thinking. And also, I think it's important to know that enlightenment involves, an understanding of what morality and virtue really are. From the point of view of Buddhism, morality is this fundamental part of existence. It's not just a list of rules that it's helpful to follow. It's sort of built into the structure of the world. Of course, then you might ask, well, why does the world seem so immoral? Well, to me, this just shows how unreal the world actually is, right? But the thing about this world that we live in, it's so useful because we can do the wrong thing. We can behave, immorally and make mistakes and all of that because that's how we learn what the results of our actions are. We have a lot of leash in this world. You could say we have enough rope to hang ourselves, but yeah, so this world isn't moral, but, this essential truth of Buddhism, is inherently moral. That's just one of those things. Like I say, this is kind of my own chat here. As my wife's family says, hard heads have to feel. All right. And also another way to think about enlightenment, people who've had these near-death experiences, and they come away, they just sort of have this different set of values. They suddenly realize that they're something that they sort of see what their life is about. And they realize that they have things that they need to be doing or whatever, and it just sort of comes to them from this, traumatic experience. But people have pointed out that, enlightenment is the same kind of thing. You just come away with this different understanding of yourself and the world. All right. that's all I'm going to say about trying to explain the unexplainable. But I think it's good to hear all these metaphors and history in the way so that you kind of know what we're doing. And it's not like you'll wake up one day and it's like, oh, I wasn't enlightened yesterday, but now I am. Oh, well, good. And it's still time for brunch, And so, it's a process, and it's this amazing thing that's yet utterly ordinary, right? So, the one thing we haven't talked about so far is lists. We've been very list-free so far in this talk. Exactly. Thank you so much. That's exactly it. And there is, of course, in Theravada, a list where it's like, so as you're heading towards nirvana, what are some of the guideposts? And there's a list called the 10 fetters, Fetters. You got to break through all 10 fetters, right? That's the goal. And so the first one is a belief in a permanent, unchanging self, right? We've been talking about this. Self-view is the first fetter that you have to break. And it's really a sort of the system of beliefs and habits is really what the first fetter is talking about. We grew up just thinking about there's a me and I got to take care of me and that's my job, and just this whole constellation of thinking around the self, that's got to go. So that's fetter number one, a challenge. They put it right at the beginning. Why couldn't we start with spitting out my gum when I'm done with it or something, or whatever. So belief in a self, number one. The second one is doubt and uncertainty about the path. Because, if you're unsure about Buddhism, or if you can do Buddhism or what you're doing or whatever, then you sort of have this doubt that's clogging up, your practice. And so it's hard to be effective. You're not really engaged. You have to give Buddhism an honest try. This is the thing. Buddhism does not require you to believe things that you're told, but you need to regard it as enough of a potential hypothesis that you will really take it seriously, and really try and practice and see what that gets you. But if you're full of doubt, whether it's the right path or even if you can do it, then this becomes a problem. So that's fetter number two, is doubt about the path. And fetter number three is this idea of rites and rituals and techniques. This idea that there's some trick or technique you can do that will basically save you from having to do the hard work. It's like, well, and like I was saying, if everybody just believes like I do, if everybody just follows this tradition and just follow these rules, then things will just automatically work out for you, That we have all these, life hacks. This is the modern idea. It's like, oh, don't do it the hard way, do it the easy way. Well, there is no easy path to purifying the mind and taming yourself. There's no trick that's going to make it easier for you, except for Vajrayana. We'll talk about that. So there are better, quicker and less quick ways perhaps, but no magic way that's going to avoid coming to grips with who you really are. That's still going to be part of it, one way or the other. So that's the first three, and those first three, if you can break through those first three, then you're at sort of the Theravadan sort of first level of progress. You're a stream enterer. You've gotten past this idea of the self and silly ideas about what spiritual practice is, and you realize Buddhism is the way. This is it for me. So you reach that level of stream entry. So that's the first three fetters. The next two are sensual desire and ill will. So these are big, obviously. Overcoming sensual desire and ill will. In fact, there's 2 stages to get all the way through to completely letting go of sensual desire and ill will. And that takes you up to, you're halfway through the fetters at that point. Belief in the self, doubt about the path, rites and rituals and mechanical tricks to getting there, sensual desire, and ill will. Ill will, aversion, hatred, all that good stuff. So those are the tough ones. And if you get through those, then you will not be reborn in this world, again, in the sensual world, you may spend some time in the more ethereal Deva realms or whatever, but if those are the tough ones, the first 5 to get through, to learn everything you got to learn in this world and move on. And the other 5 are much more ephemeral. The desire for just material existence, even in these very high, fine Deva realms. And then there's the desire for immaterial existence, just this realm of just mental activity. There's nothing physical at all. Like I say, these last 5 are all very, they're subtle. There's this idea of conceit, which is kind of a subtle sense of self, not like the belief in the self that was the first fetter. This is this habit of mind that I am a self. That's one of them. Restlessness, that's number 9. It's just, you just can't let go of this need, this addiction to activity. And then the 10th one is ignorance. Ignorance, of course, is the problem in the first place. And so you overcome the 10th fetter, and that's why you're enlightened. And so I give you this list just to know that people have thought way too much about this. And also to sort of say, well, what Buddhism has so many teachings, what should I think about first? Well, the first 3 are good places to start. The sense of self that we inject into everything. And then is the Buddhist path, am I really willing to engage with it? And then am I still looking for shortcuts and ways to avoid having, can I keep the self and still be enlightened? There's got to be a way to fit these together somehow. When you follow the Buddhist path, it's not something for half measures or tricks. So anyway, that's the 10 fetters. And so yeah. As usual, I thought this would happen. There's 10 minutes left. We haven't talked about the Eightfold Path. But how are we feeling? Anybody enlightened? Just want to know. So I can put that on my, my little card that I give out.
I'm encouraged. Having you list all those different metaphors that I read that pop up when I read, and I don't know what they're talking about. Now I know they have some sort.
Right, you have a place to put them all anyway. Yeah, the way people talk about the gold, the nirvana.
Reminds me of things.
Yes.
Metaphors and whatnot. I remember hearing somebody smarter than me, talk about nirvana, what is this business, and it was described like that, be holding oneself together through your basic ignorance, like you're really always trying to make that sandcastle on the edge of the waterline.
Right.
And the amount of energy that takes to kind of make your castle and the tides coming in and keeping it intact. Because of time, yes, this is a very obvious thing, but there's so much energy we direct into these futile psychological endeavors that when you see through it, the release, the tension release, is what you're talking about, the bliss.
Right.
Right. Suddenly, and not only that, you're seeing things clearly, because otherwise you've been interpreting everything in regards to what it means to you.
Poisoned
that
by
falls away, so everything is fresh and clear, and you can sort of, so not only is it, it's just like, that's what makes it so great.
Right.
And it's always there, it has always been there, and the fact is you've always sort of had a hunch that it was there.
Right.
But anyway, I just like that idea of just suddenly like, it's just like, you get to stand down and it's just still as energetic and even more present and even more clear than what I think I have been seeing. So,
Right.
I want to go back also to the analogy you started the class with in the introduction. They present the idea of a cloudless sky.
Yes.
Big blue sky, and then covered over with melodrama that we generate ourselves. And so, that's another way, that's a description of nirvana. But that blue sky is always there, always has been, always will be, indestructible, no beginning, no end. And we get glimpses of it between the clouds every now and then.
Right.
But imagine, actually when the clouds actually part altogether and you're just all done with melodrama. You've worn it out. You don't have to go there anymore. It's like, yeah, that's the relief that we're talking about.
Standing in the glorious morning of the great eastern sun. So,
Yeah.
Jogi Trungpa talks
And
about.
what did, and the Buddha said something like, there's that poem about his last, it's a Mary Oliver poem. We'll find it. But it's a beautiful poem. A Zen teacher presented it to us here. And I'll bring it, I'll share it actually, I'll email it. But what he said, the last words apparently were just look. Just look.
Oh,
That's it, just look.
See for yourself.
Yeah, that's always a motivator to think in terms of how hard it is to drag around the self and ego all the time.
It's a lot of work.
It'd be nurturing it to be its selfish self.
Right. Right. It's a lot of work.
Heavy wet backpack or something.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
You put bricks in it.
Right.
That's what the teachers always say, the biggest boulder is not heavy at all as long as you don't try and pick it up.
The other thing is that it's not true. The self isn't even true.
Right.
Right.
So
It's just
you're
this.
constantly being assaulted with the reality that it's not even real.
Right. It's always undermining your sense of self, and you've got to
Undermined, yeah.
scrabbling to hold it together.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm going to say a little bit about what's coming up. The other 7, the Eightfold Path. So in January, when we come back, we'll be on the second factor, which is harmlessness and goodwill, and renunciation is the traditional way to talk about it. But there in goodwill is metta. So we need to talk about metta meditation, and the Brahmaviharas, and all these other silly Pali words that I'm going to talk about. So metta. I was thinking the other day that metta we should talk about metta sooner rather than later. So it's going to be sooner. It's going to be next. So that's the second factor of the path. The third, fourth, and fifth are right speech and right conduct and right livelihood. And there's not a whole lot to say about those. We can talk about, I said, morality and virtue. They're not just nice to haves in the Buddhist scheme. In the work of purifying our minds and our hearts, virtue is very important. So we'll talk about them some anyway. And my favorite 2 things, Hirio no Tapa, right? The guardians of the world. We got to bring that up again. I mentioned that in the first thing I did. So speech, conduct, and livelihood. That's 3, 4, and 5. And then 6 is right effort. And this is the part of Buddhism that really does sound like cognitive therapy, about all these ways to work with, the mind and to encourage good states of mind and to set aside, difficult states of mind, unhelpful states of mind. That's all in right effort. The CBT, the ancient, cognitive-based therapy. And after right effort comes the last 2, right mindfulness. Obviously, there's some things to talk about there. And then the last one is right concentration or right samadhi. I just do not like using the word concentration. But mindfulness and samadhi, we might just kind of talk about together because that's meditation. The art of training the mind. Of course, mindfulness you can do throughout the day. And then the samadhi, that's, get on the cushion and calm the mind enough to actually see something. That's the key. But any thoughts?
I have 2 questions, I think are both quick. The first is just to make sure no class next week, no class the week after.
2 weeks off.
Listen to.
2 weeks off.
The second one is to take 20 seconds to ask, but I think it's a simple
About a
yes
few
or no
minutes.
question. So it's probably because of my upbringing in the Southern Baptist flavor of
Yeah.
Playland Buddhism. Anything that seems very mystic or even a little bit mystic or mentions afterlives or spiritual
Right.
it's very difficult for me to swallow.
Right.
And so this has come up many times in this class, and it's part of the reason why I'm still here. Is the response has always
Right.
been, it's just poetry, or don't worry about that, or if it doesn't help you, move on. I was just going to ask one more time very explicitly.
Right.
Is that always the case? Like as we keep going and as we talk about more things and more, does it continue to be okay?
I actually had a whole speech about
Okay,
that.
well, and I even worked on that phrasing.
Wait, I don't understand your question.
No. And so
Is the woo-woo a necessary part of Buddhism or an optional part of Buddhism, right? Isn't that what we're asking?
And even half a step past that, it makes sense to me that if I get angry every time we talk about woo-woo stuff, okay, that's not very helpful. I shouldn't.
Oh, you're cleaning.
Yeah, exactly. But if instead, if I just gently ignore it,
Right, what?
is that
right? Is that right?
fine?
Right.
Or
That's a
are we
good
going to get
question.
to a point in 3 or 4 weeks where it's going to be, I'm sorry, Rob, you're going to have to believe this.
This is the end of the road for you, buddy.
Before you come back.
No, right.
They
And
have to beat you to the door.
That's right.
right. So, right, because, I mean, and you know, in the Sunday night group, the Theravadins, we had many very skeptical people, and including me, really, because the thing about it is I have this very odd relationship, because, I mean, I have always been a hard science guy. It's like I have a degree in the physical sciences. It's
Yes.
like atom and molecules are what actually happens, you know, and
Like, I made
anything
it
else
through that.
is like
I made it through
whatever.
that water, fire, whatever.
Right.
I made it through that.
Right,
That was
that's
okay.
right. That's right. So what's the deal? And you know, in traditional Buddhism, of course, it takes rebirth and all that as a given. I mean, that's the framework for the whole teaching. But something is happening and is going to happen as Buddhism settles into the West, right? Because we have a lot of materialists. I mean, if you're an educated person in our society, the assumption is you're a materialist. There's nothing but matter and energy and all of that. And the other is that you're an existentialist, that's the only grown-up philosophy that you can have. Anything else is childish, right? And so Western Buddhism,
No, I'm listening.
Western Buddhism is, you know, it adapts to every culture that it comes to, and it will adapt so that there will be a way to practice Buddhism that is quite materialist and skeptical and existentialist in a sense, you know, and that's going to be okay. Because Buddhism is, you know, from our point of view, Buddhism is just the truth, you know, and it doesn't matter how you want to package it, or if, you know, if the idea of rebirth is completely absurd, then, you know, that's okay. Because there's this famous speech the Buddha gave to the Kalamas, you know, and because they had a different holy man come through the village every week, and every time one of them would show up and say, oh, that guy that was here last week, everything he said was wrong. This is the truth, you know, and they said, and the Buddha finally showed up and they said, please tell us, what are we supposed to think? We have all these different theories that people are throwing at us. And the Buddha said, don't believe something just because a holy man says it, or even if it's in the holy books or it's part of a tradition. You don't have to believe something just because I say it. You know, what happens is if you take up the practices and they produce results for you, basically, you know, that is the proof. You know, the proof of Buddhism, the truth of Buddhism is in your experience of the practice. That is the truth. Not because anybody said it or you're supposed to believe it. We don't have a creed per se or whatever, really. You know, so yeah, it's all about experiential stuff. And if you want to, you know, me personally, it's like I have changed in my Buddhist path. It's like, to me, it's like, oh yeah, you know, the fact that we are somehow connected to other lives that have happened. To me, this is just normal. This is just the way it is. But I did not always think that. I totally understand what it is to say, okay, can you skip past the voodoo and tell me something practical, you know? And so I have one foot on either side.
That makes you the perfect
of,
person
of
to
that,
answer.
of that divide, you know, because it's like, if we're skipping over that, fine, skip over it. None of that is essential to practicing Buddhism, at least from my point of view, you know. And I think, and from most of the others
I
too,
do want to say
you know.
something about, because Vajrayana is probably the most voodoo,
Right,
version.
it has a unique approach.
but always at the center of it is the understanding. Here's the thing. You have the capacity to imagine. And what Vajrayana Buddhism does is it takes that capacity to, like, before you come here, you visualize what it's going to be like, you imagine the room, you put yourself, right? And so then somehow your experience is going to have that overlay of your whatever dreaming mind, you know? And so Vajrayana goes right at that mind, right there, that, and it makes it visible. So we have practices in Vajrayana where I do one myself every morning, where I picture myself as an enlightened being for a little bit of time, okay? I
It's an
picture,
intent, kind of a manifestation of your intent.
exactly.
Well, I
And
mean,
it's always understood that this is not a real thing, that there's not a real thing in the sense that there's not Jesus sitting there waiting to help me. These are projections of our own mind. But what we learn in the process is how we construct the world we live in with our minds, you know? And so we make that part of it visible too by constructing other worlds. Like, what if it was a pure land? That doesn't mean I think I'm going to end up in a pure land. That means I try to think about what would it be like if this world, so one of the teachings of Vajrayana is that this is already a pure realm. We are Buddhas. We're not like, I mean, Anam Thupten was here once and he said, it's not like you're a baby Buddha and you have to raise yourself up to a full-grown Buddha. You are a full-grown Buddha, but
Right.
you don't know it. And so,
gloriously a Buddha.
yeah, you already
Already.
are, so then it's kind of like if that is the starting place, and sure, well, what would the world look like? How would I relate to people? That's what people look at that and think of it as voodoo. So we have all these images in the Tibetan room over there, and they are just that. They are like projections of certain qualities of mind.
Wouldn't you call it skillful means? You know, this is a skillful means.
That makes sense.
See,
But there's no point at which ever, I've been in this 40 years, and there's never been a point when somebody said, well, this part you have to believe,
that's right.
or you can't go any
Yeah.
further.
Right.
There have been people who said, what if you challenge that belief that you have and go a little further, maybe put a little more trust in someone else and see where that takes
Or
you.
just try out the ambiguity, you know, which, I mean,
Yes.
if you're a believer in the Enlightenment, like me, you know, it's like people are afraid of irrational things, and with good reason, right? You know, there's a reason that we don't talk about witches anymore, because that just gets people killed.
Right.
You know, and so we have a fear of the irrational. And yeah, to practice Buddhism in a lot of these more esoteric ways, you're bumping right up against that, but it's okay. We're not asking you to become a true believer, right? That's not how this works.
Never.
Thanks
So-
very much for the reassurance.
Yeah.
It reminds me, your foot in both realms reminds me of several years ago, it stopped eating meat, and something I'd make fun of for years. And
Right.
but after 6 months of not eating meat, I just thought, that's so gross, why would I ever eat that? So I can imagine if I just, after a year or two, I might be more comfortable
Right.
with these other
Should be all
aspects.
floating off into space there.
I-
So, my favorite
I
story,
want to say, though,
yes.
that these things that come up for you are important
Absolutely.
Right.
messages from your own mind, and you
Right.
should take them seriously.
Right. If
It's a good thing that you're free to bring it into your work.
right, yeah, I mean,
Right.
if you feel like we're stepping off the path into woo-woo land, just speak up. It's like, really? Is that really where we're going? You know?
Stop right there.
But you're reminding me of my favorite
That's awesome.
story.
That's great.
There was this German teacher, and they had spent like 2 days singing hymns to Kuan Yin, this bodhisattva figure, and finally one of the students, this German student, raises his hand and says, teacher, is Kuan Yin real? You know? And so he looks at him and says, Guan Yin knows she's not real. That was his answer.
I've
So,
heard versions of that
yes,
story.
That's great.
You know, it's good to be, there's nothing more voodoo than theoretical physics.
that's for sure.
And that's my.
Princeton University, you ought to
Right.
read the theoretical physicist is the leading program there. Space and time is not foundational.
Right. The universe is a hologram. I mean, it's crazy.
So, I mean, it doesn't get any spookier than that. So.
The difference is, if you do the experiment and something weird happens, those people are happy. You didn't destroy their religion.
Oh, yeah.
You opened
Right,
up
that's right.
possibilities for Nobel Prizes.
That's right. And just remember what the Dalai Lama said, right? If science proves some tenet of Buddhism is wrong, Buddhism will have to change. You know, and we're all in that same place. It's like we're sick of the fantasy. We all want reality.
But I want to say one other thing though.
Yes.
You will encounter Buddhists who
Yes.
are neurotic, who believe in the voodoo.
Even
who
humans?
believe-
Sure.
Who grasp Buddhism
I mean,
as
you
an
will.
absolute.
And it's just like because we're all humans and everybody's doing it in their own way. So-
What, I was about to say, what's the metaphor about the mountain or the top of the mountain and we all take different paths of it and
Right.
all of it serves its purpose, like
Right.
the ways you finally came around to accepting some of those views was
Right.
part of your path, part of your work.
Right, took some years.
So yours will be a different path, completely different path,
And
right?
I wasn't
then
trying to
from
do
here,
that either.
It's all the same, we're all seeing the same once we're there.
Right. Of course, Jay McDaniel he likes to talk about that. He says, but is it the same mountain or is it different mountains? You know how theologians are.
I asked Jay the same question one time and I got a much less specific answer.
You know, sometimes people feel like they have other things
That's
they're
right.
involved in that they need to protect. But I have nothing to protect. I mean, I'm a loose cannon.
That's right.
Ask anybody.
And we're just speaking for ourselves, both of
Absolutely.
us. We're
Right.
not representing
Right.
everything else, our own experience.
You know, joining the two of you three, that's a group, that's fine. That's good enough for me. If three of us are
Right.
comfortable with these, that's fine.
Yeah.
Intrepid
Thank you.
reality trip.
Thank you guys.
All right, we will stop. It's after time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, online people.
Happy holidays.
Happy
holidays.
Yes.
Hey, Rob.
Enjoy your time off. Treasure your time off.
Thanks very much.
I mean, yeah, we'll send out an email, and it'll be the meta chapter and some other stuff
Yeah, I'm with
probably.
him.
So,
I like what he said.